Be opening up into Job today, kind of introducing the book. We've been doing some preliminary discussions before, and before I want to make a reference to Genesis, which speaks about Genesis 3, verse 14, where God says, "Cursed are you above all the livestock and all the wild animals. You will crawl on your belly, and you will eat dust all the days of your life, and I will put enmity between you and the woman." Who's God speaking to here? Yes, this serpent. Now, isn't it interesting that he's part of the curse is going to be what? You're going to eat dust, yeah. Crawl on your belly. Makes you wonder what was going on before that. But certainly, the Revelation 12:9 talks about the ancient serpent called the devil, who would lead the world astray. Why is it that you think? Why is it that we often associate Satan with this serpent? I mean, outside of this, or why do you think Scripture puts that association to us between Satan and the serpent? Yes, right. So why from the beginning is that idea? What is it about serpents that might lead us to? What were you going to say, Karen? Right. So what about snakes makes us think of them maybe like a deceiver? Uh-huh. Yes.
Probably more comfortable around snakes because I worked with them. There's still something about them that's like,
yes.
It's just not frightening.
Yeah.
Some people there are, though. Where I used to work, there would be people who would not even go into the room that we had just a couple of snakes.
Really? Including the two-headed one? I mean, if that's the only thing worse than a one-headed snake is a two-headed snake.
But it's odd that there is a natural
Yeah. Yeah.
to snakes.
Mm-hmm. There is something that, yeah.
I think the general population.
Karen?
Another thing, in snakes, you never know when they're going to strike. The trust factor.
Well, they're so well camouflaged, and so you don't. I mean, I don't know how many. If you grew up out in the country, or more than a few times you go to step and you just happen to see one right there or right beside you. I remember deer hunting and a rattlesnake going up over my leg, but I saw it, but so it's just freeze, just let it pass, right? Just don't. But there's something about those things that get the blood pressure going. But yeah, they're sneaky, they're dangerous. Some of them obviously more dangerous than others. I'll usually give a black snake, one token, a mulligan, and send him out somewhere else, but if he comes back, that's probably about it for him, even for a good black snake. So I started last week doing physical therapy, pool therapy. And I am considerably younger than most of the people at pool therapy. In fact, one of the old ladies there I was last time going, and she said, "Well, that guy really got some get up and go," about me, because I was just going to the pool and a little faster than most of them, which builds my confidence because I feel like I can outrun them in the pool, most of them. In the pool, not outside the pool probably right now, but in the pool. But one of them was telling me there about how she was out the other day and she had this, she saw two eyes beaming at her out in the woods, and so some critter was out there. Got a little bit, thought it might have been a big cat. She said, "I got my son to get a big spotlight on it, and it's an albino raccoon." Have you all had any of those you encountered? No? Okay. Well, I don't know. I almost said, well, you need to call Brian. They might want to trap it and use it for something. But anyway, maybe find another albino and get together with them, right? But anyway, she said she's sure your son's got a camera out there. You're going to try to get a picture of it. So if they do, I'll try to get you one. Right? But anyway, but albino animals don't typically last all that long, right? Because they stand out. It's the cloaked ones, hidden ones. And there's a albino deer out, I think, not too far away that people have seen, and other kind of things like that. But snakes, albino snakes, they're probably not going to last very long, but they're hidden, they're quiet, and then they strike. So yeah, there's a fear about them, and maybe that's why they're associated with kind of the serpent. Let's go to Job and see a little bit about some snaky behavior here. Job 1, verse 1. There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and he was blameless, upright, feared God, turned away from evil. So, what did we learn about Job from the very beginning? Yeah, I wouldn't mind that being on my tombstone if it was, I don't know how accurate it would be, but it'd be nice to have it, on there. And what does it mean to say that he was blameless? You think he never made any mistakes? No, that's not really what we're talking about. I think we're, Yeah, well, if you say somebody is blameless, even the word to blame them, to me, it kind of seems like somebody's just above reproach. If you threw something at them, it doesn't stick. You know people like that? You ever known somebody? We had somebody here one time that made an accusation against one of our other members. I knew both people, but I knew the one they had made the accusation against longer and better. And I just said to them, well, that's a very strong thing you're saying, and it sounds like you've got really good evidence. But I am telling you, I'm 99% confident there's something wrong here. There's something misunderstood. And so I reached out to that person. I just said, hey, this person said this has happened, that you did this. Can you explain that to me? Not that you have to, but I think this is becoming something much bigger quickly. If there's something you can tell me that might diffuse it. She said, oh no, this is what this was about. And it was about a remarkable chain of events that involved, one, her nephew using her phone to respond to somebody that he thought was a friend of his, was in fact this other person who had the same name. Yeah, you can see, it was quite a chain of events that led to a massive misunderstanding that was part of a very stupid comment by a young man that helped delete it all, but not this older adult woman that she thought had said this. So we, I think, put that out pretty fast. But this woman, to me, was since blameless. I didn't think for a moment that this was accurate information. There had to be something wrong here. Now, we also know some people that somebody said, well, did you hear about such and such? And you say, well, that's not overly surprising. You're thinking in your head. You may not say it, but you're thinking, yeah, that's about right. There's people like that are not blameless. Job is in the former category. I think of like elders should be in that category, like Titus 1:7, where he talks about the overseers that are above reproach. Not arrogant, quick-tempered, not a drunkard, not violent, not greedy for gain, hospitable, right? A lover of good, self-controlled, upright, holy, disciplined. Those are ways of describing one that is blameless, I believe.
I think he could be blameless before man, but not sinless.
No, and I think there's a difference. I don't think Job was sinless, but I think even Joseph was described as blameless. I think there is something about, though, a person who is above reproach. And it's important for us to know what's going to happen to Job is not because in any way that he's evil or that he deserved that in our eyes of man. That's why we need to know he was blameless. And everybody, I think, that knew him would have said probably the same of him. And of course, Paul's prayer to the Philippians in Philippians 1:10 is that you may be pure and blameless until the day of Christ, right? So, all right, back to Job. Now verse 2. There were born to him 7 sons and 3 daughters. He has a wife, mentioned later. What did it mean to have 10 kids? Now, I know right now you may think, oh my goodness. But I mean, at this time, having 10 kids, what would you say about such a person? Yeah, the security. They are blessed. You know, I mean, most children, to have 10 kids live to later in life would be pretty remarkable in itself, right? But it would be a blessing. That's certainly how Scripture perceived such thoughts. You know, Psalm 127, verse 5, blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. It is a blessing. So he's blessed with a large family. Also, verse 3, he possessed 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 female donkeys, and many servants. So he's also a wealthy man. So that's remarkable. Not only is he blameless, but he is blessed. Verse 4. His sons used to go and hold a feast in the house of each one on his day, and they would send and invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. And when the days of the feast had run their course, Job would send and consecrate them, and he would rise early in the morning and offer burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, it may be that my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. Job did this continually. So when the kids kind of get together and they have this party and they invite them all over, Job would go and offer sacrifices on their behalf. Why would he do that? Yeah, just in case, right? Just in case they had, and maybe they had too much to drink, maybe they said something and, without thinking it through, just in case, he offers sacrifices for his children. I don't know what would be the equivalent today to get up every morning early and offer prayers for your children, devout prayers for them. And that says a lot about him right there, doesn't it? And he also says something about him that my kids, they'd never sin. I mean, his pride, his care for his kids is greater than his pride. That just in case, I'm going to take these steps. We're getting a portrait here of a very remarkable person.
Well, and not only that, but we also see, just as a sidelight, is they get along together as a family.
Yeah, and they invite the girls over
They enjoy each other's company.
who had less standing in this culture, certainly, but they all want to be together, enjoy time together. Yeah, that's a very good point. They love being around each other. Yeah. Yeah, right. So, I do think it's a wonderful thing that families want to be together. Amy and I often talk about, we love the fact our boys enjoy being together. They're all very different personalities, but they enjoy each other, and we appreciate and are thankful for that. So, verse 3, so that this man was the greatest of all the people of the East. Just in case you missed it, he's a great man and one of the greatest of the East. In fact, God will say to himself later on to Satan in verse 8, have you considered my servant Job? There's no one like him on the earth, blameless, upright, who fears God and turns away from evil. How's that for a resume recommendation? God, right? He says that about Job. How many people did God say that about that we know of? So, for all the good that Job represents, Satan is, the opposite. Verse 6. Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. And the Lord said to Satan, from where have you come? And Satan answered, Lord, from going to and fro on the earth, and from walking up and down upon it. There's some things we're going to see here about Satan that are interesting. For one thing, this whole interaction with God's kind of interesting too, isn't it? We get this idea, maybe shaped more from Star Wars or movies, this evil and darkness and can't be, in any connection, relationship to each other. Here Satan comes before God. What does it tell us about Satan and God? Are they equal powers, and who knows which one's going to win? Yeah, no.
Martin Luther said he is God's Satan.
God's Satan.
He is subservient.
Mm-hmm.
He has to answer to God. Now he's cheeky here, though.
Yeah. Yeah, the whole relationship here is, let's look a little, and note, Revelation 10:10 calls him the accuser, who accuses God's people day and night before the Lord. So there is nothing very commendable, certainly, about him, who takes advantage of our mistakes, our failures, whatever we can, that the idea that is always trying to find ways to put us in the worst light. Sometimes we, maybe somebody that's always looks at people in the worst possible light and tries to put them in the worst possible light. And these are reflections, obviously. Even though they may call themselves spiritual, these are reflections more of the devil than God. And he slandered. What does it mean to slander?
To speak false accusation.
Yes.
Someone.
I saw this definition: a malicious, false, defamatory statement or report. Of course, he tries to slander, in that sense, God with Adam and Eve when he says, did God really say you can't eat from any tree, right? He tries to present God in the worst possible light. Again, Satan is revealed and associated with this beast in Revelation 13:6, who opened his mouth to blaspheme God and to slander his name and his dwelling and those who live with him in heaven. John 8:44 calls him a liar. Right? He's a deceiver. Revelation 10:9. Have you ever had somebody slander you? I think a few of you in here have had somebody like that, perhaps. They seem to be hell-bent on destroying your reputation. Why do people, and I know there's probably different reasons for that, but if we're thinking about common denominators about why somebody would do that, what typically might be a reason somebody would do that to another?
Maybe the distorted idea that it's going to make them look better.
Okay, all right. Yep.
Pride.
Their own, pride. Yeah. Jealousy. Yeah, all these things are connected, right? So there's something about jealous of them. You want what they have, and so you try to bring them down to your own advantage, which is ultimately all about our own arrogance. And so there is certainly the sense of jealousy, I think, about him. The accuser, he's called. He's also called the adversary. 1 Peter 5:8 says, be sober-minded, watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls about like a roaring lion, seeking who he may devour. Have you ever been to the Field, the museum in Chicago? They call it the Field something Museum. Anyway, it's kind of a natural history museum, but they have there those two lions. Yes. In the late 1800s, they made a movie called The Ghost in the Darkness about them, didn't they? The two lions that killed dozens, and some reports said there were 100 people. They were unusual because male lions don't typically, I understand, hunt together like this. But they were people, these men, building a bridge there in Kenya, and they were just attacking. Another unusual thing about them is they killed and didn't necessarily eat them. It was just killing them, which is also very unusual. You know, lions will kill for food. They were just killing. And what made even more, they found a cave where they'd bring him back as if they were keeping the bones as souvenirs. I mean, it was sending fear throughout that region, just shut the building down to the bridge until some hunters were able to come in to kill those lions. But it was a very, of course, scary story. But for whatever I would not want to come across like a cottonmouth in the woods, because those are some mean. I had them chase me, cottonmouths. I mean, those are mean things. And I had a bunch of them that lived out in our creek or behind my house. I mean, summer was just killing cottonmouths. That was entertainment, you know, whenever I could. Those were on our home. There was no good snake unless it was a dead snake. But cottonmouths went way up the list there. But for all I don't want to encounter one of those in the woods, I'll take that any day over a lion. And that, you know, unfortunately we don't have lions. I did see something posted on some live report. The woman was doing a live report, and she said, "Oh, there's some dog. I think it's a dog. It wasn't. It was a mountain lion, and it was just walking right by her, and she walks right on out of the picture." Fortunately, he wasn't interested in her, but that's a whole nother game. Hiding, prowling, but the power. And Peter describes, right, Satan as this prowling lion. It's called enemy, Mark 13, tempter, Mark 4, murderer, again, John 8. So there's a sense of this craftiness and cunning about him that, again, to understand the story that we go of Job, we need to understand a little bit about him. Verse 9, Job 1. Then Satan answered the Lord and said, "Does Job fear God for no reason? Have you not put a hedge around him?" My watch sometimes thinks I'm talking to it. I'm going to silence her for a moment here. Does Job, and this is the whole, what was the word you used, Russ, about him earlier? You described him as like, Eddie from, what was that, Leave It to Beaver? Who was Eddie? Or wasn't there what was the show where you had like this kid that was like the smarmy, always acting kind, but he was cheeky. Yeah, this is the cheeky part. All right, here we go. Does God, Satan speaking to God, does Job fear God for no reason? He's doing this on God, which is, he did earlier in Adam and Eve. But have you not put a hedge around him? His house and all that he has on every side. You have blessed the work of his hands. The possessions have increased in the land. But you stretch out your hand and touch all he has, and he'll curse God to your face. He'll curse you to your face. What is he saying here? Why is Job, praise God, live a blameless life?
God has given him everything.
Yeah, he's blessed you, so why not? But you take that away, he'll turn on you. He's blameless, he's benevolent, but that's only because you've blessed him greatly. Now, it is interesting that the logic of Satan's using here, that the only reason people would be devoted to God is as if he takes care of them. And he probably is right for many people, because the moment that doesn't seem to work or something turns in their life, sometimes they do turn away from him. And one of the mantras of many people of the world, of course, atheists, is that how, what a good God. What was the little logic riddle? If a good God who is all-powerful and all-knowing knows about your problems, why wouldn't he use his power to change the circumstance? Right. In logic class, I give them this kind of riddle, and then they work through it logically later. But here, it seems to be a problem. What do we do with that? And what do you do with that? How would you answer that? Somebody said, well, I don't believe in God because Why would a good, loving, all-knowing God who is aware of my problems or this bad thing that happened, why would he allow that to happen? What would you say to that?
For one thing, bad things can happen to good people.
Yes, but what they said that shouldn't be the way it is, Marceline. If God is truly good, then he wouldn't let bad things happen to good people.
Well, then I'd say we're not puppets. God's not
Okay,
holding
all right.
us doing certain things for him.
Yeah, there's certainly something about free will, and a lot of our problems are, well, I guess all the problems of the world ultimately can be tracked back to some human bad decisions, Adam and Eve, but it's a little easier to explain to people that, you know, I had, last week, we had a number one, and let me just tell you, it's not as bad as it sounds initially, okay? But a 911 call went out of a grandmother that had found her grandson had shot himself in the head. So, I mean, that's a call that I'm automatically dispatched for. And I've been in a number of those, and I know that typically plays out. But I walk in the door, and as he's coming out in a stretcher, holding his head. And I walk in the door, and Grandma's there, and I said, so what happened? She said, well, he came walking out of the room, and the officer asked the question of, how did you know what happened, that he'd shot himself? She said, well, he walked down the hall and told me. I shot myself, holding his head like this. Well, it turns out it was either a BB gun or a pellet gun, which is not good to shoot yourself anyway in, but I don't think it didn't go through the cranium. It just tore up the skin a little bit. All right. So now this guy had written a note. I don't know. He's got issues. Obviously, he's got issues. And he's going to be for several more days in the hospital, mental health hospital. A Band-Aid took care of that, but he's going to need a lot of help with what all he's dealing with. Now, it turned out that the grandma said, or the mother arrived, she said, well, his son just fell off a high wall and broke. They thought they'd broken it. Anyway, he was in bad shape. So that had probably sent him off. Already struggling with depression, had sent him off. Now, if you ask, well, why did this bad thing happen to him? Well, he took the BB gun and shot himself in the head, right? That was his poor decision. But what about with, we just had a 12-year-old that was having seizures a while ago. I mean, why do kids have seizures? Why do children, there's just some things that it's not because they made a certain decision or somebody else made a certain decision. And I want to make sure depression, I think, is not something that somebody decides to have. I don't want to make light. Should back that up a little bit of what he did. The depression is also generally whether situational depression that happens just from circumstances that happen, like his son having a bad accident, and then there's also, more of a depression that's just chemicals imbalance in your brain, and you throw those two together, and you really have a bad mix of things. But my point being is that sometimes it's easier to say, well, that bad thing happened because they made a bad decision, but that doesn't always work, does it? Tornadoes or, like I said, cancer from people that never smoked or anything, or that's harder to wrap our head around, especially with children, isn't it? Harder to wrap our head around. So he's questioning. He's saying, well, the only reason he would be devoted to you is because of that. But I think a couple things I might note about that. That first of all, that not everything bad that happens in our life is evil, is it? Right? I expect many of us could look back in our life and see things at one point we thought were evil. I spent a lot of time telling you know, teenage kids this. You think that this end of this relationship, that God's punishing me because this boy told me he doesn't like me anymore. One day you will probably look back and thank God for that action, right? So there are a lot of things that now you think are evil. Now we see that as children. It's just we forget as adults. We still don't have all-knowing knowledge to know what, you know. There's certainly been points I really wish my knee would have played out differently, but I believe I am what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? Or as our middle son says, or unless it cripples you for life. But even then, it may not kill you, but you still could become, you know, a better person out of it. It's hard to know until much later what's good and what's bad. That's the point, or one of the thoughts.
I do think that the book of Job says there's a real problem of suffering in the world, and in a sense, God is ultimately responsible for the world in which there's a problem of suffering. I don't think the book of Job fully answers that.
Yeah.
I think you've got to go to Hebrews or go to Jesus and say what God does is suffering with us.
Yeah.
But I don't think the book of Job explains away the problem of suffering. I don't think we can either, especially when people are suffering. So here is the whole drama of Job. And in the end, he's just hanging on to God with his toenails.
Yeah.
And saying, I think God is worth it anyway.
Yeah, so as we spend some time in Job, we're going to wrestle with some of these ideas. But let me just say, I once heard it described some of the wisdom literature, such as Job, Psalms, and Proverbs, as, or say like Psalms and Ecclesiastes and Job. Let's go with that, where Psalms is like the young man who has all the answers. You do this, that happens. Train him the way a child should go, and he'll not depart from it. Do this, this will happen. And a lot of things, just, you know, if you're a righteous person, you'll be rich, wealthy. If you're evil, you'll be poor, broke, in despair. But we know that's the young man's thought. Easy. You know, this is the way it always happens. If you've got kids and they're out of control, then that's obviously just, you know, on either your kids making mistakes or in life, that's all on you. It's all your fault. I mean, maybe not. There's this clear, they just have all the answers. Like Mark Twain, I had, you know, before I had any kids, I had 5 great lessons on raising kids and no kids, and now I have 5 kids and no great lessons. But so we have all the answers when we're younger. That's Psalms. And then Ecclesiastes is like, whatever. I mean, you know, it's all, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. I mean, it's the life under the sun. I've seen righteous men suffer. I've seen, you know, godless men prosper, you know, and there's kind of that kind of a mode. Again, I'm really generalizing. But then Job is like, you know, there are some things that happen that you just don't have the answers for.
Don't you think God allows some of those things to happen because he's intending for that to make us stronger?
Oh, yeah, no doubt. Right.
It reminds me of James' statement about temptation. God will not allow us to be tempted greater than we could withstand.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that we'll withstand it.
Yeah.
But the capability is there.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think Romans 8:28 has anything to do with this?
Well, that all things work together for the good. Yeah, but especially, right, all things do. But as long as we remember that the context of that passage was the verse 27 that says about his purpose is that we be conformed in the image of his Son. If we think that Romans 8:28 is all things work together for good, meaning I'm always going to be happy, all things are going to go my way, you're going to be very disappointed when that doesn't. But if you realize that God's purpose is that we be conformed in the image of Jesus Christ, then suddenly I realize that happens for me most powerfully in pain, not joy. It happens in struggle. And I think that's what Job, at the end of the day, will tell us, is that, well, as we'll see, Job will never give be given an answer of what happened. What we read, we have the insight, Satan coming before God and all this stuff, and this. Job, all he knows is what happens, and we'll talk about that next time. It's just what happens. And later on, the friends will say, well, I'll explain it. Now, this is why, And one person, brilliant person says, well, Job, clearly your children died because you're not a righteous person. Oh, my goodness. When you start thinking you can explain everything, then there's going to be a lot of serious pain involved with that. God doesn't offer any explanation, but says, do you command the sun to rise this morning? Those kind of things. We'll get to that later. But just note that, one, we don't know why things are happening, but good can come, even from what initially might seem evil. Two, is that there isn't some cosmic battle. We don't know who's going to win. Satan comes before God like he has to ask permission to do something before God. God is in complete control, and He is sovereign, and He allows Satan to exist for now and to have some involvement among His people for now. This was revealed when Jesus in Luke 22 said, Simon, Satan has asked to sift you like wheat. But isn't it interesting? Satan has asked to do it. He's asking permission to do it. In Job 1, verse 12, the Lord said to Satan, behold, all that he has is in your hand. Only against him do not stretch out your hand. So Satan went out in the presence of the Lord. In his book, Head Game, I'm going to read this excerpt. And then again, there's all kinds of, we start getting into ancient history. There's all kinds of legends and stories, so I can't speak to the validity of it, but it sounds like an interesting story. Tim Downs is talking about in the strategies of Alexander the Great. He says, on one occasion when his army was in full retreat from a larger army, Alexander gave orders to his armor bearers to construct oversized breastplates and helmets that would fit the men of 7 to 8 feet tall. And as his army would retreat, he would leave these items on the ground for the pursuing army to discover. And why would he do that? Yeah. So when the enemy would find the oversized gear, they would be demoralized, thinking they were fighting giants. Personally, I think we're making giants run, but I don't know. But anyway, there's a story in Scottish lore of a giant that lived on the shore, and but they got word of another giant that was going to challenge him that was twice his size. And so the smaller giant was a very kind giant. This other one they heard was twice as big, was mean and horrible. And so the smaller giant, they said, well, you're going to run? No, but he had a plan. So the bigger giant comes and he storms on the house and says, where's this guy? And they said, but the other giant, the smaller giant, had dressed up like a baby and was lying there and they built a crib for him. And the mom's rocking him, says, I don't know, but his dad's about to get here soon. So the giant saw him, the baby, and then he took off running. So Satan's always trying to present himself, right, as a much bigger threat than he is. But in Genesis 3:15, he said, you will strike to the serpent, you will strike his heel, but from humanity one will come who will what? Who will crush your head. So ever from the beginning, it was determined, you will strike at his heel, but he one day will come from him and will crush your head. Hebrews 2:14, speaking of Christ, says, since therefore the children share in flesh and blood, he himself likewise took part in these same things, that through death he might destroy the one who has power of death, that is, the devil, and deliver all those who through fear of death were subject to lifelong slavery. One thing you learn about snake killing is even if you cut off their head, that head can still bite you for a bit, can't you? Or you just kill the snake and you're holding it up. You got to be careful. That head, the nerves in it can still bite. Satan is a defeated foe. He's like a dog on a leash, but if you get inside of the yard, he'll bite you. James 4:7, submit yourselves then to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. And that's the promise. Resist him. You don't mess around with him, but you avoid him. Anybody else have any final comments or thoughts here? Nancy?
I gotta tell you about it. When we was in Thailand, Udon kept saying we want to go to the snake village, and I said no.
The snake, okay. Udor is offering to take you to the snake village.
James went to the snake village.
So James did go to the snake
They have
village.
Cobras in like chicken coops,
Okay.
and they keep the cobras in there. And this guy started dragging out a cobra, and James kept backing.
Did you kiss it on the head, James, on those cobras? No, didn't do that. Okay, yeah.
And he said they never had any crime in that village.
Well, all right. Well, we in Texas they have the rattlesnake roundups where they catch those rattlesnakes and have a big and they walk out there among them. But all those guys have those anti-venom, injection things with them all the time in case they get bit by one. But anyway, all right. Who's our closer? All right, Michael.